In 2024, Kenya dropped a brand new, comprehensive rulebook designed to tackle air pollution head-on. So in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly what these new regulations mean for the air you breathe every day.
I mean, think about it for a second. It's a pretty fundamental question, right? Every single day, with every breath, we're taking in our environment. But do we have any idea what's actually in that air?
Well, it looks like Kenya is determined to give us an answer. These new air quality regulations are designed to do just that, to define, to measure, and ultimately to control the quality of the air for the entire country. So here's our game plan for this explainer. We'll look at the main goal of these new rules, how they actually define what pollution is, who they're targeting, how the whole system is supposed to work, and what happens to those who decide not to play by the new rules.
Okay, let's start with the big picture. What is this new legal framework really trying to accomplish?
The official objective, pulled straight from the regulations, is pretty clear and honestly pretty powerful. It's all about preventing, controlling, and cutting down on air pollution. Why? To make sure the air we're all breathing is genuinely clean and healthy. It's a mission statement that sets a very high bar.
Right, so before you can regulate something, you have to define it. So what does this new rulebook actually consider to be air pollution?
The official definition of an air pollutant is, well, it's huge. It casts a really wide net. We're not just talking about obvious factory smoke here. It's any fume, any particle, any gas, even a strong smell that gets into the air and has the potential to cause harm. It's designed to cover pretty much everything. Now, while that main definition is broad, the regulations also get super specific. They've created a list of priority pollutants. You can think of this as the government's most wanted list. You've got the usual suspects like particulate matter and carbon monoxide, but it also includes some really nasty stuff like lead and industrial chemicals like dioxins and furans. And this is where it all gets real. The rules translate into cold, hard numbers. This table sets clear scientific limits for the air in places where people live. So for example, the 24-hour average for particulate matter, that's PM10, is now capped at 100 micrograms per cubic meter. Now, just for some perspective, the World Health Organization actually recommends a much lower number, so this is a really big step. And let's be clear, these aren't suggestions, they're legally binding standards.
Okay, so we've got the definitions, we've got the standards. The next logical question is, where is all this pollution coming from? The regulations tackle this from two main angles. The rulebook splits polluters into two big categories, and it's pretty straightforward. You have your stationary sources, these are things that don't move, like factories and power plants. And then you have mobile sources, basically anything that moves. We're talking cars, trucks, trains, even planes. And each group has its own set of rules.
So for the big stationary sources, the rules are tough. If you're running a facility like a factory, you absolutely have to get a valid emission license. You have to stay within the emission limits for your specific industry, use the right tech to control your pollution, and even manage something called fugitive emissions. That's basically the dust that kicks up from a construction site or a quarry. They've thought of everything.
And what about mobile sources? Well, for them, it's all about testing and maintenance. If you've got a commercial vehicle, it needs an emissions test every single year. For a private car that's over 5 years old, you're looking at a test every 2 years. And this system isn't just for cars. It covers almost all forms of transport to make sure they're running as clean as possible.
So we have all these rules, but rules are only good if they're followed, right? How is all of this actually going to be managed? Let's take a look at the system of compliance.
For a factory, the whole system really revolves around this emissions license. An operator has to fill out an application, provide a scientific report on exactly what they're emitting, pay a fee, and then the National Environment Management Authority, or NEMA, has 45 days to review everything and issue the license.
And get this, it's not a one-and-done kind of deal. This is really important. An emission license is only valid for 24 months. That means companies have to reapply and prove they're still compliant every 2 years. It creates this ongoing cycle of checking and verification.
And just to give you an idea of how incredibly detailed these regulations are, this isn't just about paperwork. They literally include a mathematical formula for calculating the minimum height of a factory chimney. It even takes nearby buildings into account to make sure pollutants are spread out effectively. It's a very science-based approach.
Which brings us to the final, and maybe the most important piece of the puzzle. A rulebook is only as strong as its teeth. So what happens when someone breaks these new air quality rules?
Well, the first tool they have is something called an improvement order. If an inspector finds a problem, they can issue this order. It basically says, here's what you're doing wrong, here's what you need to do to fix it, and here's your deadline.
It's a chance to get things right.
But if that doesn't work, or if the violation is really serious, the penalties get significant. Just take a look at this number for a moment.
That's 4 million Kenyan shillings. That is the maximum fine a person can face for not following these new rules. And it's not just about the money. It can also mean up to 4 years in prison, or even both. These are serious consequences, and they're meant to be a powerful deterrent.
And as if that wasn't enough, there's another financial sting. The regulations also create a daily pollution charge. So if a factory is failing on a specific pollution standard, the authorities can charge them 10,000 shillings per day for that single failure until it's fixed. That creates a massive incentive to clean up your act, and fast.
So let's wrap this up. Kenya now has a new, incredibly detailed rulebook for its air. It's built on clear, scientific standards. It sets out different rules for big facilities and for moving vehicles. And the whole thing is backed up by a system of licensing, testing, and some really major penalties to make sure everybody stays in line.
So the framework is here, the standards are on the books, and the penalties are clear. The big question that's left is this. With this new rulebook now in hand, is Kenya's air about to get a fresh start? I guess only time and enforcement will tell.